Okay, we're going to have the Siyum for Shekalim. Okay, just a reminder to everyone that we want to acknowledge today that Rabbi Dr. Mesh Kranzler is sponsoring the refreshments in honor of the fact that this is going to start with Yoma, his 5th cycle of learning, and he recently celebrated his 39th birthday. Okay, so so in a moment, but I just so that's our lead into Shekalim that he's sponsoring. That he's sponsoring today. Okay, remember the Gemara was dealing with certain. It's basically said there were certain practices, according to Rabbi Shimon, that were not to be done when the Beis Hamikdash was not in existence. That was the new Shekalim and the Bikurim. Then there was discussion that was challenging that thought that said, what about the example of a convert and the fact that they needed to sequester money that would be paid for the bird pairs that they needed to bring, and that even though today, okay, we don't have the Beis Hamikdash, implying that they still needed to sequester that money so that when the Beis Hamikdash is built, then they could fulfill that requirement. And that was where the Gemara was bringing the challenge. Because who's to say, we're going to say that the Beis Hamikdash might not be built b'yameinu, okay, and therefore then those converts would be required to bring it. Okay? So that was where the Gemara was, where we left off. Okay? So that's where we're going to continue, because who's to say on the one hand you say that it's one thing, okay, and the other say the other. And so the Gemara answered, well, those monies for the Shekalim, that had to be paid from new Shekalim, right? And so that was where the Gemara said, V'hacha mai idlach l'meima, what are you going to say? V'hai shanahi, aren't those old? L'gabe hekdeshot acherim, v'kino shel ger eino tzarich chadasha, answered the Gemara. That the money sequestered by the convert, okay, did not have to be new shekalim. V'im hekdish kadosh, said the Gemara. But if the convert sequestered that money, it is considered holy. So the Gemara then went on, V'yinichena ad sheyibaneh beit hamikdash. So let it be sequestered until the time and then used when the Beis Hamikdash is rebuilt. Shema yivneh habayit karishona, because perhaps the Beit Hamikdash will be rebuilt as it once was initially. For example, by the 1st of Nisan, right? But to train Trumat Halishka min echad asha bizmana be'echad b'Nisan. And then that money which is donated to the Lishka, okay, by the time of the 1st of Nisan, would be considered Shekalim Chadashim, new Shekalim, and therefore could be utilized. V'hacha mai itlan, but here in regards to the convert's money, what are we talking about? Rav Hamnina v'Rav Ada bar Ahava, Rav Hamnuna in the name of Rav Ada bar Ahava, okay, who said b'shem Rav in the name of Rav, Halacha k'Rabbi Shimon, that ultimately the law is like Rabbi Shimon, and Rabbi Shimon was the one who said basically, at this time, the Shekalim and the Bikurim are not brought when the temple is not in existence. Okay? Section in parenthesis, which is basically the same language. Thus, Hadramalach Parak Kol Harokin, Uslikalan Masachet Shekalim. So we finish the Masachet of Shekalim. Okay, may we return to it at some time. Okay, so that finishes Kol Harokin, that finishes Shekalim. I have copies of the Hadran for those that would like to follow it. Okay, and I'm going to ask Jack to come forward. The Hadran, and then have Rabbi Kranzler do the introduction to Masechet Yomi.
And you snash him enough, the section Shekalim is snash him on. Lobby Alma Hodain, Lobby Alma Diyasa. Hadran Allah, the section Shekalim, Hadran Chalon, Daita Chalon, the section Shekalim, Daita Chalon. When snash him enough, the section Shekalim, snash him on. Lobby Alma Hodain, Lobby Alma Diyasa. Hadran Allah, the section Shekalim, Hadran Chalon, Daita Chalon, Allah, the section Shekalim, Daita Chalon. When snash him enough, the section Shekalim, was the snatching in on lobby on the Hodain, lobby on the Yosef. He was home for Necha, Adonai Elohim, will hey Abosenu, should hate Hodoscope, no Saint Bolon Mazer, to say Mono Yolam Habo, Anina by Papa, Rami by Papa, Nachman by Papa, Achai by Papa, Abba Mori by Papa, Dafin by Papa, Rokish by Papa, Sukkah by Papa, Ado by Papa, Do by Papa. I have no Adonai Elohim is Divrei Shoroska, Betino, with the Ampa basis. Vinia Nachnu said, Swainu said, Swainu said, Sampa basis, Kolon Yodi Shemecha, London, Sorosko, the Shmecha, the Shma, the Obey to Kamani, it's was exactly the Olam he summoned with Gekel Mano Ebosh, the Olam of Eshkat, with Decha, Kiboki, Sonu, Furkatoa, the Noilam, Dane, Kuteko, Amen, Celebrate. Modi Menachnu for Nechva, Adonai Elohim, will hey Abosenu, she something called Canaan, the Yoshua base, a Medrash. Something in the Yoshua Kronos. Shona Mashkim, Behem Mashkim, Ona Mashkim with the Besora, Behem Mashkim with the Volim Betalim. Ona Amelim, Behem Amelim, Ona Amelim and Kablan Star, Behem Amelim, the Anim of Kablan Star. Ona Rotzim, Behem Rotzim, Ona Rotzim Kayolam Abor, Behem Rotzim with their Shachas, Shenema, Yato Alahim to redeem with their Shachas, Anshe Domim, Mumimo, Lo Yechelsi Yemehem, Bani Yefta Boch. He was home for Necha, Adonai Elohim Shem Shaz Atani. The Siyum Masechet Shekalim came to Hasbenu Haskil Masechet Sisvar Machem Sayum Ulimbo Olami Lishma Lasus the kindness called Divrei Sam Matoroska Biabo. The Skusko Latanoyim Bamaroyim Samidei Chachamim Yamod Li Ulazari Shalok Dareno Shalosomish Katomi Pinu Mipizari Zareno Zari Zareno Ad Olam Yiskayim B. This Alecha Tanka Ozoch, Shachacha Tishmo Alecha, Bakitzosa Hisisirecha, Kibi Yiba Yemecha, Yosifa Lakosh Noskayim, Orachelim Bimino, Bismola Osha Bechobo, Adonai Oz Yamo Yitain, Adonai Berek, as a Noba Shalom. Iskader, Iskader, Shemid Abo, the Omer to Osa Biskaduto, Oleachyo Mazayo, the Asoka Yosin Kai Omo, the Mibne Kata di Yerushalayim. The Shachlola Hekla Gadel Merkap Polchona, the Chrom Meara, the La Soba Polchona, the Shmaili Asre, the Yamla Kucha Beriku, the Malkuse, the Kori, the Kayekon, the Mekon, the Kaidako base Israel, Bag, Allah is Mankori, the Hindu Amen. Yisadar, Yisaleb, Salosh, Medicudisha, Yelam Kodakosov, Shidaso, Tiskosov, Nakamoso, Damirom, the old Mord, and the Amen. Yisrael, Balaban, the Al, Tamide Homeko, Tamide Home, the Alchemy, the Rai said, we asked the Deng, the Kola Sabasa, Hail, the Hon, Kostamaraba, King of the Kids, the Daka, the Likum, and the Bichay, of Reconomy, Kodna, who wanted to Bishmaya, and the Amen. Hey, Shlomadam and Shema, you came alone about call Yisrael, the Amen. Shalom, and all for your ass, but I wish Shalom Aleichem, the I'll call Yisrael, you'll be in the good Amen.
Can't take the booze until the next spot.
We're going to get it. Let's wait. Let's wait till after the introduction. All right? Okay, gentlemen, it's on the Zoom. We're going to now ask Rabbi Kranzler to share with us an introduction to Yoma, and then we're going to have a little keyboard here. You're welcome to have a keyboard at home too.
Yeah, he's good. Come on, man. Come on within.
Thank you, Rabbi Reed, for the introduction. Let me just add one note that I want to thank HaKadosh Baruch Hu for giving me the opportunity this time to complete the 4th round of the Shas and to begin the 5th round, something which I started approximately 31 years ago. That itself is a story which I'm not going to burden you with. But anyway, I look forward to Mir Hashem to celebrate the next scene with you together, if the Eibishter permits me to do that. Anyway, talking about, we're starting the Gemara Yuma, and Rabbi Sugarman this morning, when he gave the shir, he asked the question, he said, where does Yuma fit in? In other words, basically, we're starting Yuma after we just finished Shekalim. Is there any kind of a seder? Is there any kind of an order that we follow that brings Yuma to the point at this point? So he said there are numerous reasons given, but he said he didn't like any of them, and the one he liked best was the following. He said that he heard this from somebody, he gave credit to somebody for this, but he said that probably makes the most sense, and that is that we have the different Sidorim. Yuma is part of the Seder Zroim, Moed rather, and Moed has Shabbos, Erevim, Pesachim, Shekalim, Yuma, Sukkah, Beitzos, Rosh Hashanah, etc. So where does Yuma come in? He said, why wouldn't Yuma be first rather than being after Shekalim? He said the answer was given that it goes into the order goes according to the size of the Masechta. If you take a look, he said every Seder starts with the Gemara that has the most blot, and as it goes along, it gets shorter. So Yuma only has 8 prokim, and the Shabbos, the Gemara Shabbos has approximately 170, daf, etc. It's the biggest. So he said, if you take a look at all the different Gemaras and all the different Siddharim, you're going to find that the biggest Masechtas are at the beginning, and as we go along, they get shorter and shorter. He said that it works as far as that's concerned. Whether this is the real reason or not, he is not sure, but he accepted that as the reason. Okay? Excuse me? No, but Bava Basra, Bava Metzia, and they started out as one originally, and then they were divided. So the 3 together is actually the biggest one. But you asked a very good question, but that's the answer as far as that's concerned. But again, I quote Rabbi Sugarman. This is not original, so basically accept it or don't accept it, whatever. If you can find a better reason for Yuma to start at this point, please offer it. Okay. Let me begin the Mishnais at this point. I think all of you know that the Yuma basically deals primarily with Yom Kippur. The Masechta Yuma deals with Yom Kippur primarily. Yom Kippur for us today is a very, very important Yom Tov because it's a fast day. We do a lot of tefillos, etc. But when it comes to the times of the Beis Hamikdash, it served a different purpose altogether. It was the one day that was dedicated to the service of the Kohen Gadol. The Kohen Gadol was the only, once a year was allowed to step in the Kodesh Kadoshim, and this once a year he performed all the korbanos of that day. In other words, the Korban Tamid, all the korbanos he was the only one who was active that day from morning to night. And he did all the korbanos, nonstop. And basically, that was the way. That's where the Kohen Gadol played a major role, on that Yom Tov. And for that reason, the Mishnah tells us that Mafrishin Kohen Gadol Bibeso Lelishkas Parhedrin. In order to make sure that the Kohen Gadol would be taken care of, it wouldn't encounter any tumor that would possibly disqualify him from performing on Yom Kippur. Therefore, he was put into a special chamber for 7 days. This chamber was called Panhedrin, and it was actually in the northeastern part of the Azora. And basically, that's where he stayed for 7 days, that to make sure that he would remain tahar and he would be able to perform all the avodah that he was supposed to perform. The Gemara later on asks the question about Parhedrin. Parhedrin actually is translated to appointees. It was a house of appointees, and previously they had a different name. The name beforehand, let me take a look just to remind myself. It used to be called Lishkas Balvat Trey. So the Gemara asks, why was there a change of name? Balvat Trey means aristocrats. This means appointees. So he pointed out the fact that in the times of the first Beis HaMikdash, the Kohen Gadol job was a legitimate job. Was the people who were appointed were those who actually earned the title by their knowledge and by their ability, etc. When it came to the second Beis HaMikdash, we already had people used to buy their influence, and they used to buy the title of Kohen and Gadol. So therefore, it was no longer considered the chamber of the aristocrats. Already became a chamber of appointees. People were appointed by how much money that they gave. So that's why you have this, and the Gemara talks about that on Daf Ches. By the way, the entire avodah that we say also on Yom Kippur, the entire avodah actually is covered primarily in Parshas Achrei Mos, and that which deals with Yom Kippur. And there's a small addition, but part of it added on in Parshas Emor itself. Anyway, let me go further a little bit in the Mishnah. So 7 days before Yom Kippur, he was sequestered. And by the way, there's one more case of sequestering in the Talmud, and that is the case where the Kohen who was in charge of the Paraduma. Thank you for helping me out. The one who's in charge of Paraduma, of burning the Paraduma, the ash, making the ashes and performing whatever was necessary for the Paraduma. He was also sequestered for 7 days before in a special chamber to make sure that he was also taken care of. And also to make sure, let's say something does occur and he does become Tomei because of Tumas Keri or whatever Kuma he may encounter even while he was in the private chamber. There is another Kohen is appointed to take over for him just in case he becomes Tomei during that 7 day period. Like the Mishnah says, Shema Irabo Psul. Maybe a Psul develops in those 7 days and he wouldn't be able to perform his avodah. So therefore, the assistant steps into his clothing and into his boots, so to speak, and he performs the avodah. Rabbi Yehuda Omer Af Isha Acheres Maskin Lo Shema Tomus Ishto. He said that we also prepare for him a standby woman to be there in case his wife dies during this period. Okay, Shenema V'chiper Ba'ado V'ad Beiso is Beiso Zu Ishto. According to the Gemara, Beiso refers to a wife, which from here we learn that the Kohen Gadol has to be married. So therefore, Rav Yehuda says, should have possibly more than one person standing by. You have 2 or 3 because we never know who's going to live and who's going to die. And the Tosfos, by the way, also asked this kasha in the Gemara Yevamos, but the answer is that here we're dealing only with 1 day, Yom Kippur. There in the Gemara Yevamos was dealing with a longer period of time. So therefore, they were more concerned about possible death occurring. Here, over 24 hours, we assume that it's unlikely that it will happen. The chances of it happening are very small, so therefore we're not concerned, but we do appoint one woman to be there just in case something does happen. And that is the Mishnah at the beginning of the Gemara Yuma. That's it. What's that? Could they have 4 wives? They could have more than one wife. Sure, polygamy was permitted, it says.
Okay. Mazel tov, Neish, you want to
L'chaim, everybody. L'chaim. Mazel tov.